Hi, how's everyone doing today? I'm doing well, thank you for asking. So yeah, I'm gonna wait a couple more minutes for more people to join. But in the meantime, based on yesterday, how do you guys feel about Redux? So Samina says interesting. Yeah, it definitely is. It takes care of a lot of different work for you so that you don't have to do it separately. Yeah, you're correct. The code is shrinking with these new elements. Like the idea for this is that now the thing about Redux is you have to understand when to use it. That's also a big part of the understanding because it is important to have a proper structure laid out for your project so that later on you don't have issues with state management. But as we proceed and as you see more of this concept, you kind of have to understand why we're using it and where we're using it. I feel like for Redux, that's a very important part because sometimes if you're using too many tools or libraries, it might get a little confusing. So that's why it's important that you guys understand the basics of Redux, understand where and why and how it's working. So later on, when you're building projects of your own, you can kind of think about it because our goal is, as a programmer, it's problem solving, right? Solving the problem in the least complicated way. So, exactly. So, this is a very important skill I feel like everyone should develop, which is understanding where and why we're using each tool or library and what makes it special in that project. Because everything has its own purpose, right? So, that's something you guys have to kind of think about, and that only comes from understanding. So I would say kind of focus on the basics. If you have questions, definitely ask. Do not hesitate. So for Redux, yesterday, did you guys see a proper working code? No, okay. So, okay, we're gonna do that today. We're gonna see a proper example on how Redux is working and kind of go through the concept slowly. Also, uh, towards the end, depending on how much time we have left, I'm gonna discuss about some interview, not interview, it's more like, when you present your project and we ask questions. So I feel like letting you guys know what kind of questions you can expect or what kind of answers we expect is something important over here. That way, when we're asking questions, you kind of know what to expect. It's pretty simple. For any project, yeah, I think we have both React and JavaScript over there. So it's gonna give you an idea of what we're essentially looking for when we are going into the question answer session. Yeah, this is just so that you guys don't get nervous from getting a question all of a sudden. So that's definitely gonna help you. Now, let us slowly begin. Yeah, so let's see how far I can go with the lecture, and based on that, I can even go a little over during lab time. That's fine. But I feel like that's a very important thing that we should discuss about. So before I share my screen, let me make sure I have all the files I need. Yeah, right now I'm just essentially getting my files from GitHub. Okay, I believe I have everything I need to work with. So let me share my screen. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen right here. Okay, so let me open up the folder that I need. Here's coding in color. So today, essentially, I'm gonna be working on the persons app that we created earlier on and kind of go forward with that. That's good. Okay, so let me close this. First, let's see how the whole app is working. It's essentially just one file for now, just the app.js. Not a lot going on. We have people's information going in and kind of making changes from there on. So what I will do is I'll do a npm install and npm start. Okay, so this is what it looks like now. I enter a name, I enter age, I enter location, and it's there. If I delete, it goes on. So let's try to keep it as simple as possible. Let's not think about the delete as of yet. So let's kind of repurpose our file for now. So essentially the purpose of this lecture is changing a React project into a React and Redux project. So I'm gonna do the state management with Redux. Okay, so before I go there, what changes do I need to make? Okay, so let me get rid of the delete part. I'm gonna get rid of that. I'm gonna get rid of this. There is another place where we past handle delete person, I guess. Okay, it turns out there are two buttons. Interesting. Or I just deleted the wrong thing. Okay, got it. So now it's compiled successfully. All right, good. So no more delete persons. That's okay. So I want to go over the concept on how the pages are kind of interacting with each other, or the functions are interacting with each other. Let me annotate it on the screen. So in order to turn this into a Redux project, we need three components, right? One is the UI, another is dispatch, another is the store, right? And inside store, we have the reducer and the state. I will be making small annotations. I'm gonna label them shortly. Let me just write down dispatch. Okay, this is UI. This is reducer. And finally, we have the state. Right? Oh, and this should be the store. Okay, so these are the things that we need. So from previous lectures, we have seen the whole thing kind of goes in this order, where we are essentially, just do this, going from here to here, right? We're passing the state to the UI from the store. But how are we kind of accessing the states? So for that, we will be using the reducer. So I have this, I have that, and to finish off, I have this. Okay, so let me just draw the flow diagrams first. I think that's gonna be easier. Okay, and this goes over here, right? All right. So how this is working is when the user changes something on the UI, it goes to the event handler, or where we have the event handler dispatching an action, which is essentially sent to the reducer. Let me label this action. So whenever something's detected in our website, the event handlers dispatch an action to the reducer, and the reducer in turn verifies those actions. And since the state is always checking up with the reducer passes in the particular action required to the state, which will be annotated using this. And the state in turn passes that value to the UI. Does that make sense? Anyone? Any question? Okay. So if we understand, so Samina asks, but also gives it back to the reducer? Yes. So based on the change, it does give it back to the reducer. But the reducer essentially what it's doing is it's just creating the kind of connection between the state and the store. So a good way to explain this would be saying it kind of just the reducer kind of decides what's going to happen inside the store. So if I am adding something, it's going to add and change the state. If I just need to call something, it just calls that particular state from the reducer, from the store. That's basically it. Reducer kind of adds functionality to the state. It essentially dynamically chooses the state or changes the state based on our requirements. So Samin asks, where does the cycle begin? From the UI, you would say, because everything begins with user interaction. Any kind of change that you see is going on in your application is always starting from the user's end because at the end of the day, user always comes first, right? All right. So, okay, if that's good, let's try to figure out how to integrate this with our code. Now, what do we have here? We have a state. So essentially the website is just us adding names of people. It's not much. So we started off with a state, which we won't be having over here anymore. State for the people. Now I'm gonna do it very simple. I don't want it to get confusing for you guys, just so that you understand the very basic functionalities. There's a lot more we can do with this, but let's first try to understand what the basics are like. So yeah, we have the first state, which is people. Then we have handle typing, handle add person, and then we have our UI elements. Okay, that's good. All right, so now back to the 3 steps. UI is gonna be over here, right? This is essentially the UI, this whole part. So something changes over here. We call in the event handlers. So in this case, it's either handle typing or handle add person, stuff like that. We call the event listener. Let's take a look at handle add person now. So in the event listener, we are essentially just setting the states in React. But for Redux, we are gonna dispatch something from the event listeners. By something, I mean the action that is required. All right. So once this dispatches an action, it needs to be sent somewhere. Where do we send it? We send it to the reducer. So right now we don't have any reducers, which we will create. Essentially, we're gonna have to create the whole store part. So let's slowly begin. Sorry about that, I had to sneeze. Okay, so all right. I think we're all set to start our code. So let me get rid of the drawings. Actually, just takes up space for no reason. Is it clear? Should I explain the flow diagram again? All right, perfect. So Let me annotate here my drawings. Okay. So to start off, let's get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. Let's get rid of this state's existence from everywhere. Let's get rid of this as well. Okay. That's good. So to start off, I'm gonna create the reducer. So for the reducer, I am just gonna write const or actually, no, let me do this first. Yeah. So const, let me call this people reducer. It's gonna be equals to these. Pay attention to the syntax and ask me questions if you have. So we have two parameters, which is state and action. In this case, the state is going to be an array of objects. So I am just gonna write state is equal to this. You always have to declare the state over here. Regardless if you have a state already created or not, you have to declare it or assign state is equal to that over here. In this case, I don't have anything created right now. I'm just gonna use this third bracket to just open up my empty object, empty array of objects, my bad. So, okay, that's that. And the action we already know. The action is gonna be whatever we're gonna get from the event handlers as a dispatch. So right now, this itself is good enough. We don't have to assign anything to it. So to make the function, I'm gonna call the arrow key and move on to my reducer. State and action, yes, these are predefined. Okay, so moving forward, actually think you can change the name for it. It's not gonna affect it because logically it's just a variable. It's not doing a lot. So these I think you can change as long as you keep track of what's going on. But it's always best practice to use state and action because these are more understandable for everyone. Okay, so moving forward, we're creating a reducer, right? So for the reducer, we are gonna have multiple options. In this case, I think we don't need multiple options, but let's just go with the whole concept. So whenever you have multiple options, in order to select any of them, what kind of concept should we use? You guys know this, you've learned this before. Even use this as actually in your projects too. So if we have multiple options, switch case, exactly, you're correct. So let us create a switch case. This is the part for the condition, and here we begin. Okay, so inside the condition, I'm always gonna write action dot type. Now, if you're wondering why I'm writing action dot type, now you can write action in different ways, but in most cases, action is kind of written as an object. So inside that object, we are gonna have a part that says type. That's gonna essentially create the difference between all the different functions that's being used over here. Okay. So state is an array and action is no, both actually both over here are an object, an array of objects. To be clear, say it again, both are an array of objects. So yeah, right now just dot action should be good enough, but that's all good. We don't have to worry about it now. So in usual cases, action kind of looks like this. So action, okay, so this is probably not the ideal tool. Okay, so for action, it's gonna be something like this. Say, I don't know, type, then something, and then I have, say, comma, payload, then something. Looks like this. Now, what is payload? That's something that you guys might be interested in. Have you guys heard about payload before in the previous lectures? So why didn't we add an empty array to action? Because right now we don't need action to have anything. So action's just gonna be whatever we dispatch. So we can just declare it during dispatching it. Okay, so back to payload. What payload essentially does, it essentially, you could say it sends in a value to the action, a value with the action. So in most cases, sorry about that. I don't know what's wrong with my voice. So in most cases, what payload is going to do, it's going to send in a value, at least if not most cases, at least for forms, what payload's going to do, it's going to send in a value with the action, which we're going to use to change our state. We'll see that in detail, but for now, I guess this one's good enough. So we understand what action essentially will be looking like. So let's go back to our code. So action.type, okay, that's good. Now, back to the switch case. Inside this, I need to create different cases. So the first case, let me just call this add person and done. And for that, I will be needing to, actually, this is not needed. I don't know why I put this over here. It's over here. So for the first case, I'll need to return something, right? So yeah, in this case, what should we return? We need to return the changed state. So ideally, when we are working with array of objects, the first thing that we need to do is make sure we have all the previous objects. How do we do that? Anyone? The triple dot, correct. Triple dot, and over here, I'm just gonna call in state. So I'm gonna take in the previous states that were there, and I'm gonna add something new to that, which will be my action dot payload. Why action dot payload? Because action dot payload is gonna hold the value that we will be passing through our dispatch using action. Make sense? Any questions? make sure you guys understand this part because this is very important. If you have any questions, just stop me, I'll repeat. Okay, so yeah, we return something. Now, whenever we go for the case add person, we will be getting an added state. Please repeat why you wrote action.payload. So action over here, we know that's an array of objects, right? Or actually, to think of it, it's not even an array. It's just an object that we're passing. Yeah, because we are gonna send multiple actions, but these actions are not gonna get saved. It's gonna be just one action at a time, sort of. So this over here, it's just an object. It's not an array. Yeah, I think I mixed that up a little. My bad. So let me kind of give you a demo of what it looks like again. So action is gonna look like this. So this is what an object looks like, right? Inside we have two, what do you call it? Elements over here. So first I have type. Say in this case, if I pass something, my type is gonna be add person, right? Next, we need another element, which we have over here, payload. Payload, okay, that should be small. So payload is essentially gonna be uh, another object or a variable essentially. In this case, we will be sending an object, but it counts it as a variable and kind of goes from there. So over here, let me say we're gonna pass in another object. So if you're talking strictly about the file types or the data types of action, this is what it's gonna be. So we're gonna pass in a sort of string called add person through type, and we'll be adding a variable which will be holding our new entries using payload. Does that make sense? Anyone? Any questions? Okay. Esra asks, so action is an object that have payload variable with yeah, essentially that's how it works. I am interested to know what payload contains. To be very honest, payload is essentially gonna contain, okay, let me get rid of this because we don't need this anymore. So payload, to be honest, is essentially just gonna contain this. In other words, I'm just gonna pass in new person over here as my payload. So this is what's gonna get passed on to our reducer. So it's gonna get all the values from there. Yeah, we'll see that in a bit. Yeah, exactly. So anything that we need to append or add to the state, we use the payload. Payload is essentially used to do any action in the dispatch. So that is something that you guys should remember. A new value for the state, yes. So yeah, it could be adding something. It could be just telling the switch case to do a function. In this case, if I was just maybe adding a number, I didn't need to pass payload. I would just I don't need to actually like send an object to the state. I'll just do +1 over here. That's it. Payload doesn't hold that much value in those cases. Okay, so over here, I don't need any other cases, to be honest. I'm just gonna go for a default and return state. Yeah, if there's nothing that matches, it's just gonna return the default state. So that, guys, is our reducer. All right. Now, since the reducer is done and we have the state working with it, we need to call the main container of all this, which is store. Now, in order to do that, let us first import what we need to import for our project. So I'm gonna import create store. So one thing, create store is actually depreciated now. So you'll see this strike through for create store. Still works, but there are better ways of doing it, which is essentially the toolkit, which we will see soon, later on this week, I believe. But this will give you a basic idea of how it works. So that being said, we also have to install Redux, right? So let's do a npm install Redux. All right, that is good. Now let's get back to the code. So I am gonna write const store. So I'm creating the store variable over here. And inside this, I'm gonna use create store. And I'm gonna mention the reducer I'm using for my store. So far, so good? Questions? Anyone? All right, amazing. Okay, so that's done. But before we go forward, one thing that we need to kind of make sure is the changes that we're making in app.js is actually working with our whole React app. So right now it's just changes in one file, but as we know, the main work being done is in index.js and index.html. So we are going to have to make changes over here as well. So Samina says store has other elements too, right? So store, essentially it doesn't need anything else right now. It's just a reducer because the reducer is working with the state as it is. So right now it's just holding the reducer, and I don't think it can hold anything else. I've never really tried storing anything. Okay, so but what the store does is like through the reducer, it holds variables, different kinds of variables based on what you need, like the states exactly. Okay, so yeah, we were gonna make sure changes being made over here reflect in the website in real time. So for that, I am gonna have to make changes in index.js. Okay, so for this, I will have to use something to wrap my app tag over here that will essentially pass the store into the app. So the store exists as code, but our website doesn't really know where it is. And our website does not really know what to inject into the app as a storage, the storage of state essentially. So for that, we are going to be using the provider tag. But for us to be able to use that, we are going to have to import another library, which will be import provider from React Redux. Redux. Okay, this should work. So we also need to install this. So I'm going to do npm install React Redux. Okay, we are good. What did I do? Hmm. Okay, I don't know how to get that. I don't know how to get rid of that, but we'll look at it later. It's just this. Okay, let's not worry about it now. Okay, so we have provider over here. I'm gonna go into my root.render and I am gonna use provider inside of this particular tag. So provider, it has a closing tag as well. So likely what I'll have to do, I'll have to take this, paste this over here. Okay, so now inside the provider, we have to kind of pass in our store. So let's do that. Store is equal to variable store. Okay, so one thing, store is not declared over here. So regardless what we do, as you can see, it says store is not defined. So what we will have to do is we are gonna have to make sure we get store from this file as well. And for that, I'm gonna go back to app.js and I will be exporting store. Export this. Make sense, everyone? Huh, that's odd. Did I misspell it? I'm not sure at this point. Okay. Um, oh, now I get it. So the mistake is, no, curly brackets fine. The reducer and the store, all of this, it needs to be outside my actual app function. So now this is gonna work. There you go. Yeah, that's where I made a mistake, which is I was creating a different function and exporting it as well. But the thing is, I cannot export something from within over here because I'm already exporting the whole function. That's why I have to do it outside to keep it separate. Okay, so that's done. Let me go back to index.js And inside this, I am gonna have to import store. So what I'm gonna do, I'm already importing app over here. I'm just gonna import store as well. So this should be good. Now let's take a look at the errors that we're getting actually and kind of work through that. People unidentified, new person unidentified is assigned a value but never used. That's a warning. People, so essentially people is causing problems. Where is people? People is over here. No, that's person. Oh, there you go. There's people. Mm, there's people. Okay, we'll slowly get rid of all that. But so far, is it understandable? Small recap on what we've done. We have at first created our reducer and we created our store where we included our reducer. Then we created the connection between the index.js and our store because stores being used separately, right? So yeah, then we are just creating the connections, importing necessary libraries, and making sure our app is getting our store from the index.js as well. So far, so good. Anyone? Any questions? Do I have to repeat any part that you don't understand? Any questions? No questions? Okay, that's amazing. So let's actually do one thing. Let's go on a 10-minute break and let's come back and see the rest of the implementation where I'm essentially just gonna start dispatching actions from my event handlers. All right, so I will see you guys in 10 minutes. All right, we are back. Just one sec. Okay, so for the GitHub repo that I'm using, it's the same one that we've been using for the past. The coding and color Git repo. We just have everything in the main. So if you guys want to fork and um kind of clone these projects, you can definitely do that. Yeah, for sure. Just give me a second. Okay, so this right here is the link. You guys can't clone it directly. You will have to fork it before you clone. Remember that. And you can just go ahead. Okay, back to where we were at. Let me share my screen. Okay. So let's take a look at the components that we have. So we need UI, we need event handlers with dispatch, and we need the store. So we have created the store already, and we have the reducer and state inside. What we have to create now is our event handler, and we will be dispatching our info from there to our reducer. So let's begin. Let me go back to app.js. Okay. Um, right. So let's take a look at the code. So handle typing, let it be. We don't need to change that. What we do need to change is handle add person. So this is an event handler that we need to make changes to. So what kind of changes are we talking about? So essentially, we will be needing to send a dispatch from handle add persons so that whenever this button is being clicked, we are sending an action to our reducer and it's going to essentially just create a new state. Actually, I'll rephrase that. It's not going to create a new state, it's going to add something to the state. And based on whichever actions we do, we can do a lot of different actions just with this, but for now, let's stick to the basics. Okay, so what else do I need? I've installed Redux, everything is done. Handle typing is good. Okay. So over here, instead of this, let me just write down store dot dispatch and inside. Okay. So now you guys tell me, what should I put inside this curly brace? So I have answers handle add person, new person. Essentially, we are gonna add new persons, but how? I'm just looking for the syntax. I've shown this before in this lecture. Just wondering if you guys understood. We are sending an action, definitely. We're sending in an action, but how is it gonna look like? Can you guys write it down for me? Action.payload, yes. But okay, remember I showed you how the action object looks like? Yeah, so I was asking for something like that. So in this case, I'm gonna send in type first. Exactly. So I'm gonna send in type, which is, in this case, add person. Okay. So that is done. Now I'll add another element. So I'm gonna add payload. And payload is gonna be new person. Right? I think I need to reset set person as well, but that's later. But okay, so for now, let's see if this works. If we have any errors over here. We still have errors where people is being unidentified. So that means there are more changes to be done over here. Just store.dispatch is not good enough. So as you can see over here, next ID. People used to be our previous state. Remember the one that we had before Redux? So we have to change this into something that Redux understands. Essentially, I will be getting the state length, and based on that, I'm gonna create the ID. No. So store, you're partially correct. It's store.get state. So let me just change this into store dot get state. So this is what we use to get values from the state. Okay, so this will be essentially just changing the ID and adding something to the next one. So that's taken care of. But one thing is that we're doing all this, but we do need to store store something in a variable that we will be essentially using later on. So let's create a variable which is going to be const, and let's call this people. So people is equal to store dot get state. Is this line clear for everyone? What other elements are there in get state? So get state is going to get everything inside your state. That's basically it. So in this case, we're getting the whole state. And for the case of ID, we're getting the whole state, but we're doing the length as well, just so that we can get the next ID. Dot length and okay, I get what you mean now. So you could use, I believe, any predefined function with this, I think. It's just like a regular function that we're using, get state. So length or any other, even map works. Okay, so that's done. We are storing our get state into our variable people. So let me see if I have to make any other changes over here. So I have people.map person, all that. Okay, it should work now. You guys can see the page, right? Perfect. Okay, so let me just write down John. Let me put the age down as 33. Let me put the location as Toronto. Okay, so something's up. It's not working. Why is it not working? Let's check that out. Um, hmm. First thing that I would do is yeah, I will console.log, but I'm just checking if I missed something. So I'm going for map. I'm using person. I'm not using the ID over here. Is that why it's not working? Oh, okay. That could be it. So let me write down the key is equal to person dot ID. Let's try it now. Um, okay. Guess we have to console.log. So I want to see what it looks like when I get the state. Right? So after this, let me just console.log. Or maybe even after this. No, it's not going to exist over there, so there's no point. I'm just going to write down console.log. And inside this, I am going to write down people. So, H. It's just rendering multiple times. Let's not worry about it now. But that's the thing. Something wrong with my event listener. So when I am clicking it, it's not working. So the key, I'm using that just to identify the ID of the person for later on. But it doesn't really, I don't think it's holding any value in this right now. But I have to figure out what's wrong over here. Location. Everything seems fine. Age is okay. Person.age. Name is fine. Person.name. Oh, send the list as well. It should be okay. Key is fine. People. Okay, so people.map persons. So everything over here is fine. Something's wrong with dispatch, I guess. Huh. So when I'm hitting dispatch, it's getting the action.type and add person should work. I have state action.payload. Everything seems normal. Ah, interesting. This is being exported correctly. That's all right. Okay, so app is there, everything's good. Handle typing is okay as well. I think it's just the add persons that's creating issues. So I have store. And person, next ID, everything's good. I don't know what's going on. Store.getState.length plus 1. Okay, this is because I'm not setting. So let me try something over here. There could be a chance that I'm not really changing the state person over here properly. So it's going to be name. Okay, so that, then age, again, comma, location, comma. I don't know, everything seems fine. HH, 2322. Oh, there you go. Okay, so what's happening is every time I'm typing something, it's not refreshing the particular state. So when I do this, it's essentially refreshing the state for me. That way, the next state can come in. Does that make sense? Anyone? Yeah, for sure. So, okay, what's happening is set persons is essentially storing whatever I'm entering over here temporarily, right? So what's happening is every time I'm entering something, it's just changing it on spot. Once I'm done entering, it's not really refreshing the whole set person state. So once I use the particular line over here, set person, and I'm kind of just creating blanks over here, this gets changed back to blanks and the previous state gets pushed into the display. Does that kind of make sense? Or should I repeat? Can we see the person function? Yeah, of course. So person is over here. It's just basically this using use state, person, set person. So I'm just refreshing that whole state so that the next state can come in. Does that make sense for everyone? Or should I explain again? I'm okay with explaining again if you have questions. Just let me know. By that, do you mean line 48? Okay. So let me see how I can give you a proper explanation. Let me think of a way to simplify this. So it was line 48, right? That was the problem. Set persons. It's inside handle add person. All right. So the thing is the line set person with name, age, and location, it's essentially just used to reset the component state for person. So after successfully adding a person to the Redux store, it ensures that the input fields, name, age, location are cleared after the person is added. But the thing is, essentially, yes, that's what I'm doing. So the thing is, if I don't clear that, the value doesn't change. Initially, the value is null, right? Over here, as you can see. So it just keeps on showing the null value, even though I'm changing it. But since I don't have the reset option over here, it's not really pushing the value into the store. Yeah, so that was to fix the previous issue. Does that make sense? Okay, amazing. Anyone else?
Sorry, I just wanted to. So, when you are resetting it, what's the problem that is doing with the store? That I'm not getting.
So, just give me a second. Why am I not? Oh, I was using my MacBook speakers all this time. Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I had my headset on, but for some reason the computer was using the default speaker. Anyways, so for this, sorry, could you repeat your question? I kind of got lost over there.
I got the set person that you resetted it because the input, you wanted to clear the input field. But what is the problem with the store thing that I'm trying to understand? What
Okay.
problem is it causing?
So the thing is like after dispatching to add a new person to the Redux store, you want to clear the component state of person, right? So the input fields are reset to empty values. So the thing is, for it's very common React pattern in applications when dealing with forms or input fields that resetting the state helps to provide a clean and consistent user experience. Now, for what's happening over here is once I do a set person, it's actually changing the state dynamically. So right now, the store does not deal with person or set persons, right? I have to manually make changes to that. So the entire point of doing this is that I am resetting the person state so that the previous value gets sent to the store and the new value or the default value or the reset value is stored in the person state. Does that make sense? Or else it's just gonna keep on adding up default values to it.
It might be helpful to repeat what was the problem, like what happened when you before you put the set person,
Okay, so let's
like to clear out what happened with the app.
yeah, for sure. So let's do this. Uh-huh. Okay, so I'm clicking the add persons button over here, right? But nothing's happening. That's because new person over here, it's essentially a state, right? I'm essentially just updating the state. So once the state is being updated, then and then only we are gonna get values into our reducer. So right now, is the state being changed in any way? Are we using the set person over here? No, right? So in order to make that kind of change, we have to create that particular change in the state as well as the reducer. So over here, new person, it holds the value of whatever we have entered over here, right? Now that state is not being changed, and without that state being changed, nothing over here is changing. So for that, I have to change the state of persons. And that's what I did over here using set persons. So once I'm creating a change in the state, I'm essentially going to the next state. The previous states go to my reducer and is being used to display whatever we have in that over here. Is that better? Does that make sense? Please everyone answer, because if you have a question, I can repeat. Anyone else with questions? Yes or no? Any answer helps. No questions. In this case, no, because I am not adding another state to the. So the thing is, you see this set person state over here, this could be added to my, this could be added to my reducer as well. but we're slowly gonna go there. So for now, let's focus on one state as it is and understand the basics. That's why I didn't add multiple states, because it might get confusing. Just want you guys to understand the basics first. This is how like a very basic Redux code will work. And later on, we're gonna add on to it. But other than that, any questions? Like even if this was inside the reducer, we would have to reset this every time, because without resetting it, nothing's being changed over here in our view. Can you repeat the setting the state? Yeah, for sure. So the thing is, this state over here, it just holds the values that we're getting from here, right? But it was not really doing anything for us. So in a way, this set person, it just kind of refreshes the new state and sends the previous state into the store and stores it there. Does that make sense? So this, essentially what this is doing, it's just refreshing the whole, I wouldn't say code, the new state for you to add one. So it's just creating a stage for you to kind of enter whatever you have to do. Anyone, any more questions? Exactly, the function is exactly, you're correct. The display is not being changed because it's still in the previous state. So Esra is asking, what about set person's new person? It's not always setting state. It is, but it's not really refreshing it, right? It's just holding it over there. So it holds the state, but it's not necessarily being refreshed. So this is just to refresh and make it ready for the next input to come in. Does that make sense? Anyone? Any questions? Okay. I hope this was clear enough. Do we understand how Redux basically works and what are the components? So you guys tell me, if I ask you to change one of your React codes, let's say your React assignment, into Redux, what are the components that you would need in order to change that React project into a Redux project? Just kind of list it out, saying 1, 2, 3, like that. If you can add a short description, that's amazing, but just listing it is good enough as well. So what are the components that we need to turn that into our Redux code? Remove use states, definitely. So Esra said dispatch action, reducer store. So action is not really a step itself. Action is what dispatch is sending. So, but essentially it's dispatch, reducer, and store. So Navita is saying reducer, store, wrap root component. Yes, correct. That's a very important part with provider, then dispatch. Samina says store, reducer, dispatch to yes. But yeah, do not forget that wrapping the root component with provider is very important. Ideally, do that at the very beginning, just so that later on you don't have to worry about it. Because if you forget to change that, it's not going to show anything. And maybe like you forget, and once the whole thing is done, you'll be like, everything seems correct. Why is it not showing anything? Why is there no changes in the website? So it can be like very silly but it might cause problems later on. So always remember, when doing a Redux project, make sure you make all the connections you need to at the very beginning. All right, so that's amazing. You guys understand the basic concepts. So we will be looking at a more detailed version, not a more detailed version, like more concepts to it later on in the next lectures. So let's actually talk about the projects and the questions that might arise. Let me first find the doc. All right. I believe you guys can see my screen with the slides. It's visible, right? All right. So one thing, you guys already kind of know what we expect or what we ask during the questions for those who already have completed your first project. So you kind of understand what kind of questions we ask. But just like a small run through, that we might ask about the data type of different variables. For example, over here you can see that we're asking about data type of variable numbers. In this case, what do you guys think is the data type for this? It's an array, correct. So it's stuff like this that you kind of have to know. Small questions might arise. So in the next part, we have a loop. We're asking you to explain how this code essentially controls the execution of our loop. You might have to explain what's going on inside and sort of just go through the functionality. You might have to explain why the console logs are here, like why are the console logs there are true or why it's false. It depends on your code in general. But for a conditional statement, you have to kind of explain like why, what's happening. Essentially, throughout, it's gonna be very similar questions like what is happening, why is happening, and where is happening. This is how I would kind of make it short. So whenever you're doing it, like if you do the project yourself without any sort of help, you already know what's going on and how the thing works. But if you are taking references from ChatGPT or Stack Overflow, like it's okay to take references as long as you name them on the side with a comment. But for cases like those, remember you understand these kind of questions. That way, when we ask, you won't be confused. So yeah, over here as well, like we have a while loop. We might ask, what does the variable num control for a while loop? Then we might ask what has to be true about num for us to print fizzbuzz, fizz, or buzz. So essentially how the whole operation is working inside. And then we're talking about how we are incrementing num. So essentially all the functionalities, you see. It's the same for this. We are gonna ask about data types. Always remember, understanding what kind of data type it is will definitely go a long way with your understanding of the code. So if you don't understand the data types properly, there's a good chance later on when you have to make some changes, you might feel like you don't understand what's going on. So understanding the data types is a very important part as well. So you have, what does the function do? What data type does it accept? What is it returning? For any function, these are very common questions, like what's it doing? What kind of data type does it accept? And what it is returning. So these are some basic questions about functions that you'll be getting. Then whenever you use callback functions, we might ask you questions about that as well. For example, over here, we're asking what our filter is doing, right? And what data type does people.filter return? Stuff like this. Yeah, it's kind of similar, the questions for each and every slide, but it's very detailed so that you guys can go through the slides and kind of understand what kind of questions to expect. So from HTML and CSS, these are very general questions and will differ from project to project, but being able to answer these sort of questions and the desired detail will be sufficient. So what do you have to explain? You have to explain the purpose of the HTML tags in your code, describe the overall design, layout of your project. You have to kind of explain the relationships as well between the parents, the childs, the elements. You have to discuss the use of CSS classes, IDs, whichever you use, and you have to describe any responsive techniques that you have implemented on your project. Stuff like that. Then if you used hover or focus or any other additional element. Now comes to React. So for React, key questions are, what is our state? What data type are we using to represent it? How does it handle increment for updating our state? In this case, we're handling increment. So we're talking about how the handle increment function is working, or the event handler in general, how the handle decrement event handler is working. So what happens when you click your button and how does it update the state? In general, what it's doing, you could kind of describe the relationship between the components and how each of these are working different from each other and why our state is important and what it's doing. Stuff like that. We have some more sample questions from React over here. Kind of similar, like what's our state doing? What's the data type? If you have a function, in this case, it's Axios, where we are getting a API call. So stuff like this, you kind of have to explain slowly whenever we are going through a sort of interview process for your project. But that's basically it. Like, it's not much, but taking a look at these slides will definitely go a long way for you guys in understanding how to go about the whole question answers. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions? All right. Any questions about Redux? Okay. What do you guys think about Redux then? Is it better? Is it more useful? So about if there's any website available for Redux practice, kind of look into it. Like there's full stack open that you can definitely take a look at. Even we refer to it. So you can take a look at those. But for practice, you can definitely just clone what we've done and redo it again. But yeah, like hands-on work is the best way to learn. So the only way to know if you have problems or not, it's when using Redux. So Christian says Redux, it is useful for when our project scales. Exactly. When you've got a lot of states going on in your project, Redux definitely helps you with that. That way you don't have to worry about which state is where. You can just take a look at one component or one part of your code and you can understand what's going on. You don't have to scatter around different components for that. Samina, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wanted to say when you're making any changes to an already existing, for example, right now there was a React assignment in which you made changes and added Redux elements. So when we fork uh, the uh, the um, uh, the code in color GitHub from the GitHub, does it so those files will be overwritten, right? The ones that were just the React only thing.
All right, exactly.
So
What I
if you guys are making any changes, my recommendation would be if you can make a duplicate copy and name it different so that when we pull it, it does not overwrite. Uh,
Okay, let's do
those
that.
things.
Um, Coding in color. Oh, but I already have it. Okay, let me just do something. Try this. Paste it over here. Let me name this person app Redux. Okay. Um, I will change this to what I don't know. I'll change it to 6. Okay, where did it go? Oh, there you go. So I'll get rid of this close folder. So I'm gonna take terminal and I don't want ports. Okay, so I'm gonna go to desktop again. CD desktop. Check out the GitHub link. Git clone. Okay, before I go into that, I should check the code that I just copy pasted. Desktop test CIC or something, right? Right. Source app.js. Okay, it's fine. So I can just go to my file explorer. I'm just gonna copy this. I need this. I don't know why that's there. So I have this coding in color, lecture examples, Control V. That's taking longer than usual. Okay, since that's good, just open a terminal. I really have to get rid of this. This is bothering me. I don't know how that came up. Okay, there you go. Yeah, I just have to drag and drop. I think what happened was I mistakenly pulled this over here on the side. Okay, so I will have to close this folder again. I have to. Actually, I don't need to open anything. I can just push this. So terminal, CD, desktop, CD, coding in color. Oops. And I'm gonna do a git add. Git commit. Redux. Add it to person. Folder. Okay, enter. Files changed. Amazing. Git push origin main. Okay, let me check it out now. Lecture examples. Yeah, that should be good. We have the before Redux and after Redux app, both of them over there. You guys can definitely check that out. No problem. So you can just fork it and clone and can do it on your own for reference. You can definitely check out the code that we've done. So yeah, that's good. So if you guys don't have any questions, let's go on our 10-minute break and we'll come back for the lab. All right, see you guys in 10 minutes.